Okay, today we are going to touch on the subject of Jesus. What were the conversations like? How did he approach the subjects? And most importantly, what was his meaning and method of descriptive terminology? Now, I was going to call upon his spirit to sit in on this, but I must remember to stay focused on the simplified objective, which as it stands, is well within my scope of handling due to as much as I had witnessed in the vision I was shown during my coma many years ago. As long as I do not stray from my path, I am confident that I can succeed in this. Besides, Jesus had said he is within all who have faith, and he is there when he is needed, not called upon as a duty. So he may step in later in this discussion if I'm understanding him correctly. Now, to understand this general atmosphere of their discussion, we must understand and visualize what life was like and the social boundaries were like during his time, for this aspect shapes the ones who would ask him questions. Above all else, the viewers must remember this is from a spiritual observation and should be viewed as that first and foremost. Life in the public at these times in the world were very separated into one of the things Jesus had the greatest issues with, and that was classes. He did not agree with the social aspect of ruling classes of one group above the other. As a child, he grew up as an exception to that class, and the rules that applied to everyone else, it seemed, but him. His father was of the Egyptian noble family. When the Romans took control of Egypt, they granted diplomatic immunity to all families of the royal line, not out of kindness but out of tradition. That was how they ruled the lands under control of Rome at that time. They had a set guideline of how things worked, and even the highest Roman officials had problems manipulating their way around that. One of those rules was that any who were of noble descent were given dual citizenship in order for them to be able to move around more freely and perform their tasks as nobility, which meant less stress on the Roman generals sent to oversee affairs in various regions. Plus it gave a sense of comfort, they figured, seeing their rulers and heirs still functioning, which would stifle rebellion, they assumed. So because of Jesus' father, Joseph, who was the nephew of Herod, Jesus was given dual citizenship. Joseph was of noble birth but was outcasted from the family sort of because of his love for Mary, who was a temple slave at the time when they met. Herod had instructed Joseph that their infatuation could not continue, for she was a Hebrew girl and he was of the noble house of the Pharaoh. Then an argument shortly endured, and Herod told him if he refused his command, then he would be cast from his rights as an heir to the seat of the Pharaoh and the wealth and security it provided, forced into poverty. Joseph had made up his mind, though, for he proclaimed to plan to marry her. So thus Joseph was forced to take up the craft of the carpenter to support his family to be. This was just before Mary became pregnant, less than a week. They had made the plans and set the date, but were having problems still with the reception, for she was Hebrew and he was Egyptian. I would go on and tell you of the Immaculate Conception, for the Trinity angels were there with Gabriel that night, and they were the three wise men as well, but I must stay to the task and not falter in my path. So this gives you some background to Jesus and his upbringing environment, which will help you all understand why he responded sometimes, as you will hear soon, in the ways he did. To the children he grew up with, the Hebrew children, they mostly saw him as the special kid who would always ask him questions because he was basically nobility in their midst. The fact he was the Son of God did not become an issue until later. So even before that, they were treating him as source of knowledge that could tell them how things should be, and this is where the issue with the social class began. Him and his friends would run and play in areas the others could not. Most of the parents forbid their children to be friends with him because of his noble birthright, mainly because it would always let the parents into trouble and usually executed or tortured for their children's deeds with the noble class who befriended them. They would get into trouble and the parents would usually suffer the price for it. And that Jesus could understand. What he did not understand was when the children would get caught and the noble kids that would be to blame, yet the Hebrew children were held responsible and the guilty would get away without punishment. That was the seed of the issue that led to him and his stand against the social classes and dual citizenship. Many times throughout his pilgrimage as he and the apostles traveled, they would reach points where they would have to go through the scene where the Roman soldiers would stop him when they came into town, or they would often, briefly, stop by to see him where he was lodged for the night to check his travel plans and ask him where they were going and where they came from. Jesus would withhold showing his Roman seal of citizenship unless he really had to, and did not like speaking of his Roman rights, and would get agitated when one of the apostles would mention it when the Roman guards would begin harassing them. So that gives you a good glimpse into the type of life Jesus grew up into. He had always known he was the Son of God. Even as an infant, there were times when the baby Jesus would do and act in ways that were not normal of most children. Like when he was not even 1 year old, while Mary was seeding the garden for the next season's crops, she had placed him next to a group of flowers that were wilting and dying. He saw the sad look on Mary's face and reached out and touched the flower, and it stood up healthy and new. It can best be described as he had brought life back to the flower. Mary noticed and was astonished, then nervous that someone would see, and as most mothers would do, she paced back and forth waiting for Joseph to return from the quarry. I think he was at that day. When he walked in, she unraveled on Joseph about the temples wanting to hunt him down again. But Herod, as I understand it, had earned the wrath of the Pharaoh for his hunting, not just of Jesus but of the birthright of prophecy the Pharisee had told him of that made him a child of destiny. That right was the birthright of the celestial child of the moon goddess, or what many call now the Immaculate Conception, or the forbidden right of the birth of an Nephilim child. I tell you this now, and swear it is true. The process in which is described as the Immaculate Conception, as one say, forefather of this bloodline before my fall far away from his presence to be here among you, that this process was the process in which the angels had conceived children with the mortal women. I could go into detail of that, but it would once again stray us off the path before me. So quick recap. Mary's nervous about them finding out Jesus is one of those children that Herod was looking for, but they work through it, but it causes even more of a secluded childhood for Jesus, plus his friends would constantly suddenly not be allowed to talk to him anymore because of his heritage, and thus his life stayed that way until the day he began his search for his apostles, and is why he and they were so close to him. Now that we have the atmosphere of Jesus and his apostles, we have two last aspects, and I'll make this quick and simple. When in public there were certain actions and things one could not say or do. Women could not walk up and talk to him, married or single, unless they were servants sent to him. But since he was always addressed as a teacher everywhere they went by his apostles, that gave him a status like that of a healer. Once his status as a teacher was established in whatever city they traveled into, then it was a certain type of way they would be treated. To them he was a teacher and the apostles were his students, and they were on a journey to attain enlightenment from him, and he was searching for divine inspiration, holy places, sacred grounds, places where prophets that had come before him, so he might draw from their life's events and be inspired by the same holy presence that called to them. That was the basic official definition of their pilgrimage. The apostles, however, knew he was the Son of God, foretold to be the Messiah and to be the living embodiment of the promise God had made to Abraham and Moses and Jacob, that he would come to the earth in the flesh of man, and that man would be his mortal son, sent to live among them and suffer as they do, in order to show he was an understanding God in his judgment, and to have faith in his wisdom, for he would come to earth as a mortal to know what it is to be man, and that is why faith in the Son was key to having faith in God, for through him we would know he understands us as well, and our sorrows and griefs we feel, and thus to have faith in him because of this promise of lowering himself into one of us for a time to show us he is a just and understanding God before all other gods. I see the wisdom in this, and as he would say, it is good. So now we have everybody and their positions basically covered. Let us begin. We have Jesus sitting in a small square area of grass within a stone structure that would be the town square, and today is a day when the teacher would decide to go and share his wisdom, attained along his pilgrimage with the people faithful to Yahuwah ben Elohim. His apostles would sit closest to him, and people would gather to hear the words of one who has traveled to learn the wisdom of the prophets and is now giving his knowledge to the people. So this would quickly draw the attention of the local priests, who were not allowed to openly dispute what the teacher would say unless it was not in line with their teachings of that prophet's wisdom they had recorded. For people would walk up to ask him of various great mysteries of life that a certain prophet was known to have sought the answers to in their lives. If he knew or had been enlightened by the presence that had spoken to the prophets, then he would answer with a lesson spoken by that prophet in a way that showed he had truly been blessed with that prophet's wisdom. So if someone asked, "Teacher, I come to seeking the wisdom of the God of our prophet who was Moses, who had once said that whosoever should follow the law of God shall be righteous in the eyes of God, but teacher, there are over 600 laws that we are to follow. How can one achieve this?" Where then Jesus would reply and say, "Hear me when I say this, and know that it is truth that all men are naturally born capable of, and thus they are imperfect when compared to the divinity of God, for he is truly perfect in all his ways." And thus was the lesson that God had given to Israel through Moses for them to realize, so that all may find salvation from sin through realizing they are and have always been capable of sin because of their imperfection. That only through faith in the Lord can we achieve success in keeping to the laws of Moses. Only through his perfection can we stay clear of sin. From this point, the scribes who longer in the background would speak up and say their contradiction if what he said did not align with their recorded scripture, and say, "But teacher, may he forgive me for my trespasses and you as well if we are wrong. But did Moses also not say that through faith in his Son that I would send to you, who would be the embodiment of my law's perfection? Through faith in him who is my Son shall you also have faith in me, and he shall be the covenant for man that shall uphold the laws that were given to Moses for you to obey." This is how the teachings were spoken to the people along his pilgrimage, and that is the basic atmosphere that I am allowed and given wisdom of, for I feel the emanating light of his all-encompassing presence receding to show me that he is done enlightening me in this subject. I thank you for your time viewing this, and please, no one go out and build a religion of this, and especially no jihads or crusades or anything like that. Got it? I'll make that clear now. You think God is fearful when angered? You ain't experienced me if I gotta come up out my grave over some drama like that. Peace unto you.
Say about getting across.